The California sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, as if the heavens themselves were an artist's canvas. The Pacific Coast Highway, a serpentine ribbon of asphalt hugging the rugged coastline, buzzed with the life of evening travelers. Among them was a vintage Porsche 911, its polished black exterior reflecting the fading light like liquid obsidian. The engine's growl was a low, steady rhythm, a sound that seemed to belong to the road as much as the crashing waves below. Behind the wheel sat Keanu Reeves, his face partially obscured by a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses that mirrored the twilight. To the world, he was a star, a man of mythic proportions. But here, in the solitude of the open road, he was simply Keanu, a seeker navigating the labyrinth of his own thoughts. Miles away, the small coastal town of Solana slumbered under the weight of its own quiet beauty. Its narrow streets were lined with weathered buildings, their facades kissed by salt and time. On the edge of this sleepy town, Maya stood by the ocean, her bare feet sinking into the damp sand. Her sketchbook rested on her lap, its pages filled with bold, chaotic strokes of color, visions of a world she longed to share but felt no one understood. Her deep brown skin glowed faintly in the fading light, a stark contrast to the muted tones of the beach around her. She was a dreamer, an artist whose fire burned fiercely, even as rejection after rejection threatened to extinguish it. The galleries in the city had smiled politely, their words thinly veiled dismissals. Yet here she remained, defiant against the tide, her art her only anchor. The weather turned suddenly, the first fat drops of rain splattering the sand. Maya scrambled to gather her belongings, her portfolio clutched protectively against her chest. By the time she reached the awning of a closed antique shop, the rain had become a torrent, its relentless rhythm drumming against the pavement. She shivered, her clothes clinging to her skin, her breath visible in the cold, damp air. The streetlights flickered to life, their glow refracted through the rain like shards of broken glass. A pair of headlights cut through the downpour, the familiar silhouette of a vintage Porsche coming into view. It slowed, pulling to a stop beside her, the passenger window rolling down with a mechanical hum. The man behind the wheel removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that seemed to hold the weight of countless stories. "Need a ride?" Maya hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She'd seen his face before, on screens and magazine covers, but in this moment, he was just a man offering shelter from the storm. "Yes," she said finally, her voice trembling. Inside the car, the warmth was immediate, the scent of leather and rain-soaked asphalt filling the space. Keanu merged back onto the highway, the wipers sweeping away the rain in rhythmic arcs. For a time, silence reigned, broken only by the engine's hum and the occasional hiss of tires on wet pavement. Then, without looking at her, he asked, "What do you dream of?" The question lingered, heavy and electric, as if it had been pulled from the depths of her own mind. Maya turned to him, her eyes meeting his. In their shared silence, something shifted, a fragile connection, a spark of understanding. The rain blurred the world outside, but within the cocoon of the Porsche, a new journey was beginning, one that neither of them could have anticipated. The story unfolds in the fractured world of Etheris, a land suspended between realms, where gravity bends in floating islands, the endless sky. Etheris is a place of breathtaking beauty, with sprawling forests of bioluminescent trees, cascading waterfalls that vanish into the void below, and skies painted in hues of perpetual twilight. Beneath its serene exterior, however, lies a world torn apart by ancient cataclysms, where the remnants of civilization cling to the edges of fragmented landmasses. Airships powered by rare Ethereum crystals traverse the skies, connecting isolated communities struggling to survive. The air hums with latent magic, a force both revered and feared, as it is said to have caused the shattering of the world centuries ago. The story centers on four main characters, each hailing from different corners of Etheris. Kale, a brooding scavenger with a knack for navigating the perilous voids between islands, is haunted by the disappearance of his younger sister during a raid on their village. His rugged appearance and sharp wit conceal a deep well of guilt, driving his relentless search for answers. Kale's path crosses with Lyra, a gifted ethermancer exiled from the floating city of Solara for her unorthodox use of magic. Lyra's fiery red hair and glowing, rune-marked hands make her an outcast, but her determination to uncover the true nature of Ethereum's power propels her forward. Though initially wary of Kale, she sees in him a kindred spirit, someone equally shaped by loss. The duo encounters Rin, a young engineer from the industrial island of Farron, whose mechanical creations defy the limits of imagination. Rin's prosthetic arm, crafted from salvaged Ethereum, is both a testament to her ingenuity and a reminder of the explosion that claimed her family. Despite her tragic past, Rin exudes an infectious optimism, her bright green eyes always scanning for solutions to the world's problems. She joins Kale and Lyra after they save her from a band of sky pirates, offering her expertise in airship repair and navigation. Completing the group is Delos, a stoic warrior from the nomadic Skyguard clans, who wields a massive glaive imbued with dormant magic. Delos is bound by a vow to protect the balance of Etheris, though his rigid sense of duty often clashes with the other's more personal motivations. Beneath his stern exterior lies a man grappling with doubts about the traditions he's sworn to uphold. As the group journeys across Etheris, their initial motivations begin to intertwine. Kale's search for his sister leads to clues about the origins of the cataclysm, while Lyra's studies into Ethereum's secrets uncover a dangerous conspiracy within the ruling elite of Solara. Rin's inventive mind proves invaluable as they face mechanical monstrosities and collapsing islands, while Thalas's knowledge of ancient prophecies hints at a greater destiny for them all. Their relationships evolve from reluctant alliances to bonds forged in trust and shared purpose, though tensions occasionally flare as their differing perspectives collide. The environment itself becomes a character in the story, with its ever-shifting landscapes and unpredictable storms testing the group's resilience. The floating islands, each with its own ecosystem and culture, provide a rich tapestry of challenges and discoveries. Amid the chaos, the characters must confront not only external threats but also the ghosts of their pasts, as they uncover the truth about Etheris and their role in its uncertain future. As the rain eased, Keanu's gaze flicked toward Maya, her soaked portfolio resting on her lap. "Your art, what's in it?" She hesitated, then spoke of bold colors and untamed visions, of rejection and resilience. Keanu listened intently, his silence urging her on. "Maybe the world's not ready," he finally said, "but that doesn't mean it doesn't need it." The small coastal town of Larkhaven was a place where everyone knew each other, and secrets rarely stayed hidden. For 17-year-old Clara, her goal was simple yet daunting, to uncover the truth about her mother's mysterious disappearance 10 years ago. Clara's father, a quiet fisherman, refused to speak of it, leaving her with only fragments of memories and an old, water-stained journal her mother had left behind. Meanwhile, her best friend, Sam, a tech-savvy aspiring journalist, had his own ambition, to leave Larkhaven for a prestigious internship in the city. Sam saw Clara's quest as the perfect opportunity to hone his investigative skills, but he also feared it might lead them both into dangerous territory. Their first obstacle came in the form of the town's tight-knit community, which seemed oddly resistant to their questions. Clara and Sam's inquiries about her mother were met with evasive answers and nervous glances. The local librarian, Mrs. Hargrove, who had always been kind to Clara, suddenly became distant when asked about the journal's cryptic references to the Solstice Society. This secrecy only fueled Clara's determination, but it also created tension between her and Sam. While Clara was ready to risk everything, Sam worried they were meddling in something far bigger than they could handle. As the two delved deeper, their friendship was tested. Clara's single-minded focus often clashed with Sam's cautious approach, leading to heated arguments. Yet, their bond also deepened as they uncovered small but significant clues together. One night, while searching through old town records in the library's basement, they discovered a faded photograph of a group of people standing near the cliffs, one of whom bore a striking resemblance to Clara's mother. The back of the photo was inscribed with the words, "Winter Solstice, 2003. This discovery hinted at a connection between her mother and the enigmatic Solstice Society, but it also raised more questions than answers. Meanwhile, a subplot began to emerge involving Mia, a newcomer to Larkhaven and the daughter of the town's wealthiest family. Mia, who initially seemed aloof and disinterested, revealed she had her own reasons for being drawn to the town's hidden history. Her father, a powerful real estate developer, was planning to buy up large portions of the coastline, claiming it was for modernization. However, Mia suspected his motives were tied to something far more sinister. Reluctantly, she joined forces with Clara and Sam, bringing her sharp intuition and access to resources they lacked. Her presence added a new dynamic to the group, as Clara struggled to trust her and Sam found himself drawn to her enigmatic nature. As the trio pieced together the puzzle, they faced escalating challenges. Strange occurrences began to plague them, mysterious figures watching from the shadows, cryptic warnings left on their doorsteps, and an unnerving sense that they were being followed. Clara's father, noticing her growing obsession, forbade her from continuing the search, leading to a bitter confrontation that left her feeling more isolated than ever. Despite the mounting pressure, Clara, Sam, and Mia pressed on, their shared determination binding them together. Each carried their own fears and doubts, but together, they began to uncover a web of secrets that threatened to unravel not only the truth about Clara's mother but the very fabric of Larkhaven itself. The morning began like any other in the small coastal town of Greyhaven. The salty breeze swept through the narrow streets as shopkeepers prepared their stalls and fishermen unloaded their early catch at the docks. For Elena Carter, a marine biologist stationed at the local research facility, it was just another routine day. She had planned to spend her afternoon cataloging coral samples, a quiet task she found comforting. But as she walked into the lab, her colleague, Dr. Marcus Hale, burst through the door, his face pale and his hands trembling. He clutched a tablet displaying a series of seismic readings. "Elena," he stammered, "you need to see this." The data was alarming. A series of unexplained underwater tremors had been detected just miles off the coast, far too close to Greyhaven for comfort. What made it even more unsettling was the pattern, erratic and unnatural, as if something massive was shifting beneath the ocean floor. Elena's heart raced as she scrolled through the readings. These weren't ordinary tectonic movements. Something was wrong, and the urgency in Marcus's voice confirmed her suspicions. "We need to alert the authorities," he said, but Elena hesitated. She knew the town relied heavily on its fishing industry, and any disruption could devastate the already struggling community. Still, ignoring the signs wasn't an option. Before they could act, the first sign of chaos erupted. A deafening roar echoed from the harbor, followed by shouts and panicked screams. Elena and Marcus rushed outside, joining a growing crowd gathering at the shoreline. What they saw sent a chill down their spines. The water was receding unnaturally, exposing the ocean bed in a way that no one had ever witnessed. Boats tilted awkwardly on their sides, and fish flopped helplessly in the mud. A tsunami? Elena shook her head. This wasn't a natural phenomenon, it was something else entirely. As the crowd murmured in confusion, a sudden, violent tremor shook the ground, knocking several people off their feet. Cracks splintered through the pavement, and the air was filled with the sound of shattering glass. Elena's mind raced. Whatever was happening, it was escalating quickly, and they had little time to act. She turned to Marcus, who was already dialing the emergency response team. "We need to evacuate the town," she said firmly, though her voice betrayed her fear. Marcus nodded, his hand gripping the phone tightly. But just as they began organizing a plan, a low, guttural noise rumbled from the exposed ocean bed. It was unlike anything Elena had ever heard, deep, resonant, and almost alive. The crowd fell silent, their collective gaze fixed on the horizon. Slowly, a massive shadow began to rise from the depths, its sheer size dwarfing anything they could have imagined. Panic erupted as people scrambled to flee, but Elena stood frozen, her mind grappling with the impossible. This was no ordinary disaster. Whatever was emerging from the ocean was the source of the tremors, and it was heading straight for Greyhaven. In that moment, the quiet life Elena had known was shattered. The urgency to protect her town and uncover the truth behind a mysterious phenomenon propelled her into action. The status quo was gone, replaced by a looming threat that demanded answers and survival. The rain intensified as the Porsche sped along the winding highway, its headlights slicing through the curtain of water. Maya clutched her portfolio tightly, the leather strap digging into her fingers. She glanced at Keanu, his hands steady on the wheel, his expression calm yet unreadable. The silence between them felt heavy, not with awkwardness, but with unspoken possibilities. She finally spoke, her voice tentative. "I dream of being seen. Truly seen. My art, my vision, it's like shouting into a void." Keanu nodded, his gaze fixed on the road. "The void can be loud," he said, almost to himself. His words carried a weight that hinted at his own battles, his own voids. Before Maya could respond, the car slowed as they approached a small roadside diner, its neon sign flickering against the stormy night. "Let's grab a coffee," he suggested, pulling into the gravel lot. Inside, the diner was a warm refuge from the storm. The smell of frying bacon and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. A few patrons sat scattered across the booths, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of hanging lamps. Keanu and Maya slid into a corner booth, the laminated menu sticking slightly to the table. A waitress with a tired smile approached, her name tag reading Linda. She poured them 2 steaming cups of coffee before retreating to the counter. As Maya wrapped her hands around the mug, the warmth seeping into her cold fingers, she noticed a man sitting at the counter. He was older, with a thick gray beard and a sketch pad in front of him. His pencil moved furiously across the page, capturing the world around him in quick, precise strokes. Maya's eyes lingered on him, curiosity sparking. Keanu followed her gaze and smiled faintly. "That's Arthur. He's been sketching here for years. Used to be a big deal in the art world, or so they say." Maya's interest deepened. "What happened?" Keanu shrugged. "Life, I guess. Fame can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes it cuts too deep." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the door. A young man, soaked to the bone, stumbled in, clutching a guitar case. His face was pale, his movements frantic as he scanned the room. He spotted Keanu and froze, his eyes wide with recognition. "You're him," the man stammered, his voice trembling. "You're Keanu Reeves." Keanu offered a small, disarming smile. "That's what they tell me." The young man hesitated, then approached their booth. I don't mean to intrude, but I need help. My car broke down, and I'm supposed to play a gig tonight. If I don't show up, I lose my shot." Keanu glanced at Maya, who raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the unfolding drama. He turned back to the young man. "Where's the gig?" "Santa Monica," the man replied, hope flickering in his eyes. Keanu leaned back, considering. "All right," he said finally. "We'll get you there." Maya blinked, surprised. "We?" Keanu grinned, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Why not? A little detour never hurt anyone." As they left the diner, the storm began to ease, the rain tapering off into a gentle drizzle. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Maya felt a spark of excitement. The night was far from over, and it seemed to promise more than just a ride to Santa Monica. The rain intensified as the Porsche sped along the winding road, its headlights slicing through the curtain of water. Maya glanced at Keanu, the question still echoing in her mind. What did she dream of? It was a simple inquiry, yet it stirred something deeply buried. She hesitated, gripping her portfolio tighter, the edges of her canvases damp from the storm. "I dream of being seen," she finally admitted, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "Not just for what I look like, but for what I create. For what I feel." Keanu nodded, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "Being seen," he repeated, as if tasting the weight of her words. "It's harder than people think, isn't it?" His tone carried the weariness of someone who had spent decades under the glare of the spotlight, yet still grappled with the loneliness that came with it. Maya studied him, her initial awe giving way to curiosity. Here was a man revered by millions, yet he seemed as lost as she felt. The car's interior grew quiet again, save for the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. Maya's thoughts churned like the storm outside. She had spent years pouring her soul onto canvas, only to be met with rejection and indifference. Every no chipped away at her confidence, but the fire inside her refused to die. "Why did you stop?" Keanu glanced at her, one eyebrow raised in confusion. "Stop what?" "Living for yourself," she clarified. "I mean, you're Keanu Reeves. You could do anything. Go anywhere. But here you are, driving alone in the rain. Why?" The question hit harder than Keanu expected. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, the leather creaking under his fingers. "Maybe I forgot how," he admitted after a long pause. "You spend so much time being what people expect you to be, you lose track of who you really are. And when you try to find it again, it's complicated." His voice trailed off, the words heavy with unspoken pain. Maya looked out the window, the rain blurring the world into a watercolor painting. She understood that feeling all too well. "Complicated doesn't mean impossible," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "It just means you have to fight harder for it." Her words hung in the air, a quiet challenge that neither of them could ignore. As the Porsche rounded a curve, the lights of a small diner came into view, its neon sign flickering against the storm. "Let's stop here," Keanu suggested, pulling into the gravel lot. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and the smell of wet asphalt filled the air as they stepped out. Inside, the diner was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the storm outside. They slid into a booth, the hum of conversation and clinking dishes creating a cocoon of normalcy. Over steaming cups of coffee, their conversation deepened. Maya spoke of her struggles, the barriers she faced as a woman of color in the art world. Keanu listened intently, his questions thoughtful, his interest genuine. In turn, he shared fragments of his own story, his battles with grief, the emptiness of fame, the search for meaning beyond the roles he played. The two strangers, seemingly worlds apart, found common ground in their shared yearning for authenticity, for connection. But as the night wore on, the stakes became clear. Maya had a gallery interview in Los Angeles the next morning, a rare opportunity that could either launch her career or crush her spirit. Keanu, sensing her apprehension, offered to drive her there, his own plans suddenly secondary. Yet beneath his calm exterior, a storm brewed. He had spent years avoiding the city, the memories it held too painful to confront. Helping Maya meant facing his own demons, a choice that terrified him. The rain began to fall again as they left the diner, the road ahead uncertain. For both of them, the journey was no longer just about reaching a destination. It was about reclaiming the parts of themselves they had lost along the way. The rain intensified as the Porsche sped along the winding highway, its headlights carving through the curtain of water. Inside the car, Maya clutched her damp portfolio, her fingers tracing the edges of its worn leather cover. Keanu's question lingered in the air, its weight pressing against her chest. What did she dream of? The answer felt too vast, too tangled in years of rejection and quiet resilience. She glanced at him, his profile calm yet inquisitive, as though he could sense the storm raging inside her. "I dream of being seen," she finally said, her voice steady but soft. "Not just looked at, but truly seen, for my art, for who I am." Her words hung between them, raw and unfiltered. She hadn't meant to be so candid, but something about the quiet intensity of the moment made pretense impossible. Keanu nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tightening slightly, as if her words had struck a chord. "You know," he said after a pause, his voice thoughtful, "I've spent most of my life being seen, but not really known. Fame is strange like that. People project their ideas of you onto a screen, but they never see the person behind it." His admission surprised her, peeling back the layers of the untouchable celebrity persona she'd always associated with him. For the first time, he seemed human, flawed, searching, just like her. The car rounded a sharp curve, and the ocean came into view again, its dark waves crashing against the cliffs. Maya turned her gaze to the water, its restless energy mirroring her own. "I paint because it's the only way I know how to speak," she said, her voice gaining strength. "But every time I try to share it, the world seems to tell me I'm not enough. Not talented enough, not marketable enough, not." Keanu glanced at her, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name, empathy, perhaps, or understanding. "The world doesn't get to decide your worth," he said quietly. "That's for you to define. And sometimes, the people who don't fit into the world's neat little boxes are the ones who end up changing it." His words struck a nerve, a spark of validation igniting within her. For years, she'd carried her dreams like a fragile flame, shielding it from the winds of criticism and doubt. Now, for the first time, she felt that flame grow stronger, fed by the unexpected kindness of a stranger. As the rain began to ease, the Porsche pulled into a small roadside diner, its neon sign flickering against the night sky. "Let's grab some coffee," Keanu suggested, his tone casual but inviting. "I want to hear more about your art." Maya hesitated, her instinct to retreat warring with a newfound sense of possibility. Finally, she nodded, stepping out of the car and into the glow of the diner's lights. Inside, the warmth enveloped her, and as they slid into a booth, she felt the weight of her doubts begin to lift. The conversation that followed was unlike any she'd ever had. Keanu listened intently as she described her work, her inspirations, her struggles. In turn, he shared stories of his own battles with self-doubt and the pressures of living under the spotlight. Their words wove a tapestry of connection, each thread revealing a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. By the time they left the diner, the rain had stopped, and the sky was clear, the stars scattered like shards of glass across the velvet night. As they stood by the car, Maya looked at Keanu, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice carrying the weight of everything she couldn't put into words. He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. "Sometimes, all it takes is someone to see you." The Porsche glided along the rain-slicked highway, its headlights carving through the darkness. Maya clutched her portfolio tightly, the edges of the leather case damp from the storm. She glanced at Keanu, his expression calm yet unreadable, as if he carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. The question lingered in her mind, "What do you dream of?" Instead, she turned her gaze to the window, watching the rain blur the world into an abstract painting. "I dream of being seen," she finally said, her voice trembling but resolute. The confession surprised even her. She hadn't meant to say it, but something about the quiet intimacy of the moment compelled her to share. "Not just looked at, but seen, for who I am, for what I create." Keanu nodded, his grip on the wheel tightening slightly. "Being seen," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "It's harder than people think, isn't it?" His tone was laced with a quiet understanding, a hint of his own struggles buried beneath the surface. "Sometimes, the world only sees what it wants to see." Maya studied him, her curiosity piqued. There was a vulnerability in his voice, a crack in the polished veneer of his celebrity. "What about you? What do you dream of?" He hesitated, the question seeming to catch him off guard. For a moment, the rhythmic sound of the rain filled the silence. "Peace," he said at last, his voice barely audible. "Not the kind you find in a quiet room, but the kind that comes from knowing you've done enough, that you've been enough. The car slowed as they approached a small roadside diner, its neon sign flickering against the stormy backdrop. Keanu pulled into the parking lot and turned off the engine. "Let's get out of the rain," he said, his tone lightening, though his earlier words still hung in the air. Inside, the diner was warm, its walls lined with faded photographs and vintage memorabilia. A waitress greeted them with a smile, leading them to a booth by the window. Maya placed her portfolio on the seat beside her, the leather case glistening with droplets of rain. Keanu ordered coffee for them both, his demeanor unassuming, almost ordinary, despite the occasional curious glance from other patrons. As they waited, Maya opened her portfolio, revealing a series of bold, vibrant paintings. Keanu leaned forward, his eyes scanning each piece with genuine interest. "These are incredible," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "Why aren't these in a gallery?" Maya's lips tightened. "Because people like me don't get that kind of chance," she replied, her tone tinged with bitterness. "It's not just about talent, it's about who you know, where you're from, what you look like." Keanu frowned, his jaw tightening. "That's not right," he said firmly. "The world doesn't get to decide your worth. You do." The words struck a chord in Maya, igniting a spark of determination she hadn't felt in years. She met his gaze, her eyes burning with newfound resolve. "Maybe it's time I stopped waiting for permission," she said, her voice steady. Keanu smiled, a glimmer of pride in his expression. "Now that's a dream worth chasing." Unbeknownst to them, a shadowy figure sat at the counter, their eyes fixed on the pair. A phone buzzed in their hand, a message flashing across the screen, * target acquired. "Proceed as planned." The rain continued its relentless dance against the windshield as Keanu and Maya drove in silence, the world outside reduced to a blur of water and shadows. Maya clutched her portfolio tightly, her knuckles white against the leather strap. The weight of unspoken dreams pressed heavily on her chest, and for a moment, she considered brushing off his question. But something in his tone, gentle yet insistent, urged her to speak. "I dream of color," she began hesitantly, her voice trembling like the rain. "Of showing the world what I see when I close my eyes. But it feels like no one's looking. Or maybe they just don't want to see it." She glanced at him, half expecting indifference, but his gaze remained steady, encouraging. "It's like I'm shouting into a void," she added, her voice breaking. "And I'm running out of breath." Keanu nodded, his hands steady on the wheel. "I get that," he said, his voice low but resonant. "The world can be loud, full of people telling you who you're supposed to be. It's easy to get lost in it." He paused, his jaw tightening as if wrestling with his own memories. "But sometimes, you have to trust that your voice, your truth, will cut through the noise. Even if it takes time." Maya studied him, her skepticism battling with a flicker of hope. "Easy for you to say," she murmured. "You're Keanu Reeves. People listen to you." He laughed softly, a sound tinged with both amusement and sadness. "You'd be surprised. Fame doesn't make you immune to doubt. Or rejection. It just makes the stakes higher." His grip on the wheel tightened momentarily before he relaxed. "But I've learned that the things that scare us the most, they're usually the ones worth chasing." As the car rounded a curve, the rain began to ease, revealing a breathtaking view of the ocean, its surface shimmering under the faint glow of moonlight. Maya's breath hitched at the sight, the beauty of it momentarily silencing the storm within her. Keanu slowed the car, pulling into a small overlook. He turned off the engine, and for a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic crashing of waves against the rocks below. "This," he said, gesturing toward the horizon, "is what keeps me grounded. Moments like this. They remind me that the world is bigger than my fears, my doubts. That there's always something worth fighting for." Maya stared at the ocean, her heart swelling with a mix of awe and longing. "But what if I fight and still fail? Keanu turned to her, his expression serious. Then you'll know you gave it everything. And that's more than most people ever do. He leaned back, his gaze returning to the horizon. The real failure is never trying. The weight of his words settled over her, heavy yet strangely liberating. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of possibility, a reminder that her dreams, though battered, were still alive. As the rain clouds began to part, revealing a sky dotted with stars, Maya realized that this moment, this unexpected encounter, was more than a coincidence. It was a crossroads, a chance to reclaim her voice and step into the unknown. She looked at Keanu, her resolve hardening. I think I'm ready to try, she said, her voice steady. He smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. Good, he replied. The world needs your colors. The rain had stopped by the time they reached a quiet overlook, the Pacific stretching endlessly before them. Keanu parked the car and turned to Maya, his expression open, inviting. She hesitated, clutching her portfolio as if it were a shield. But his earlier question still lingered in the air, urging her to speak. Slowly, she opened the portfolio, revealing her paintings, bold, unapologetic bursts of color that seemed to pulse with life. Keanu studied them in silence, his gaze lingering on each piece. Finally, he looked up, his voice steady but charged with conviction. The world needs this. They just don't know it yet. Maya's breath caught, the weight of years of rejection momentarily lifting. But no one listens, she admitted, her voice trembling. I've tried, but doors keep closing. Keanu leaned back, his eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for the right words. Doors close, he said, but that doesn't mean you stop knocking or building your own. His words struck a chord, resonating with the resilience she had buried under layers of doubt. For the first time in years, Maya felt seen, not just for her struggles, but for her potential. The conversation shifted, becoming a two-way exchange of vulnerabilities. Keanu spoke of his own battles with self-doubt and the isolating nature of fame. People think success erases fear, he said, but it doesn't. It just changes the shape of it. Maya listened, her earlier awe giving way to a deeper understanding of the man beside her. They were, in their own ways, navigating the same storm, searching for meaning, for connection, for a way to leave their mark on the world. As the night deepened, Keanu reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a notebook. Write down your dream, he said, handing it to Maya along with a pen. She hesitated, then began to write, her words flowing like the tide, asterisk to create a space where art isn't judged by the color of the artist's skin but by the story it tells. When she finished, Keanu read it and smiled, his approval a quiet but powerful validation. Then let's make it happen, he said simply, his tone leaving no room for doubt. The next morning, they drove back to the coastal town, the sun breaking through the clouds like a promise. Keanu introduced Maya to a gallery owner he knew, a woman who championed underrepresented artists. Maya's work spoke for itself, and the owner agreed to feature her in an upcoming show. As they parted ways, Keanu handed Maya his number. Call me when your show opens, he said. I'll be there. Weeks later, Maya stood in the gallery, her paintings finally adorning the walls. The room buzzed with energy, filled with people who saw not just her art but the soul behind it. And when Keanu walked in, true to his word, their eyes met across the room. He gave her a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. Maya's heart swelled with gratitude and purpose. She had found her voice, and now, the world was listening. Her story wasn't just hers anymore, it was a call to action for anyone who had ever felt unseen. And as the applause grew, she knew this was only the beginning. The rain had stopped by the time they reached a quiet overlook, the ocean stretching endlessly before them. Keanu parked the car, the engine's growl fading into the serene whisper of waves below. Maya sat in silence, her hands resting on her portfolio, the weight of her unspoken dreams pressing against her chest. Keanu turned to her, his expression open, expectant. So? Maya exhaled, her words tumbling out like a dam finally breaking. She spoke of her art, her struggles, and the countless doors that had been closed to her. She confessed her fear that the world would never see her for who she truly was, that her voice would be drowned out before it could even be heard. Keanu listened, his gaze steady, his silence an anchor in her storm of emotions. When she finished, he nodded, his response measured yet powerful. The world doesn't define your worth. You do. Keep creating, even if no one's watching. The right moment will come, but only if you're ready for it. His words struck a chord deep within her, a spark of hope reigniting in her chest. She opened her portfolio, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, showing him her work. The vibrant colors, the bold strokes, they were a reflection of her soul, raw and unfiltered. Keanu studied each piece with the kind of focus that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. This, he said, pointing to a painting of a stormy sea, this is powerful. It's not just art, it's a story. Don't let anyone tell you it's not enough. As the night deepened, their conversation shifted, flowing like the tides below. Keanu shared his own battles with self-doubt and the pressures of living under the spotlight. He spoke of finding solace in simplicity, in moments like this, where the world faded away, leaving only the present. Maya realized that despite their vastly different lives, they were connected by a shared humanity, by the universal struggle to find meaning and purpose. The barriers she had imagined between them dissolved, replaced by a quiet understanding. When he finally dropped her off at her small apartment, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon. Maya stepped out of the car, her portfolio clutched tightly in her hands, but before she closed the door, Keanu handed her a card. A friend of mine runs a gallery in L.A. Show them your work. They'll listen. She stared at the card, her heart pounding, then looked up at him, her eyes glistening with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. As the Porsche disappeared down the street, Maya stood there, the card warm in her hand. She felt a shift within her, a determination she hadn't known she possessed. This wasn't just a chance encounter, it was a turning point. She would keep painting, keep fighting, not just for herself but for every unspoken dream that deserved to be seen. And as for Keanu, he drove on, the sun rising in his rearview mirror. He smiled to himself, knowing he had done something that mattered, however small. In the grand tapestry of life, it was these fleeting connections, these moments of shared humanity, that left the most lasting impact. For both of them, the journey was far from over, it was only just beginning.